Welcome to Inside Startup Investing, the only podcast where you can invest in every guest. On this episode, I will be speaking with the founder and CEO of Rejuvenate Bio, Daniel Oliver. As a reminder, if you like what you hear on today's episode, you can invest in Rejuvenate Bio on WeFunder, regardless of whether or not you are accredited, with a minimum investment of $250 until August 28th, 2026. Rejuvenate Bio has all the makings of what could be a blockbuster biotech investment opportunity. Of course, with all biotechs, especially of an early stage nature, there is tremendous risk. But born out of George Church's lab at Harvard Medical School, this company has received millions in funding from some of the most notable names in animal health and biotech sciences, including a just closed $6 million round backed by Merck Animal Health. And the financing is for good reason. Rejuvenate Bio has developed a gene therapy that is showing a real ability to cure chronic conditions in aging pets. In a far oversimplified way, Rejuvenate uses a virus to deliver specific genes to certain parts of the body. Think of genes as the instructions that tell the body what to do. For instance, they have shown an ability to send a liver gene via virus to the liver, which then tells the body to produce a naturally occurring protein that helps regulate metabolism and inflammation. In doing so, they've shown an ability to reverse cardiac damage and improve metabolic function in their preclinical models. The technology is clearly innovative and on the cutting edge of science. But what I really respect about Daniel and his team is that they are de-risking the business by pursuing both an animal and human indication. We all know that human trials can take north of a decade and cost hundreds of millions of dollars, while animal health is dramatically quicker, and there are ways to even monetize their development in the animal health segment right now. By doing so, they're giving themselves optionality and an ability to succeed commercially in the near term while developing the even larger medical indications in the longer term. At first, I was concerned about focus, but after meeting with Daniel, I am confident the team has the right mindset and strategy to deliver shareholder value as they continue to develop some of the first of its kind gene therapies that can actually reverse and restore health in aging patients rather than just mask or slow the symptoms. Gene therapies are still very early days, but the potential promise is exciting. So listen in if you want to learn about what the future of aging-related health treatments could look like for your pet and you alike. Now let's get on to the show and welcome Daniel. Let's get a little bit of background on who you are and how you came to found Rejuvenate Bio.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Oliver. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rejuvenate Bio. We're a spinout out of George Church's lab at Harvard Medical School, and our chief scientific officer and my co-founder, Noah Davidson, is, besides George, the primary inventor of the technology. I actually know Noah for greater than 20 years now. We both went to undergrad at Caltech together. And so, we took kind of disparate paths. Noah ended up doing the more traditional academic path, getting a PhD in synthetic biology and joining George Church's lab as a postdoc interested in aging. I personally have more of a business background. I have an MBA from Harvard Business School and have been working to launch science-based companies and launched another one out of the engineering school at Harvard before starting to talk to my good buddy Noah and hearing about all the really interesting and unique things he was being able to discover and invent alongside George Church. And so I was pulled in as an entrepreneur in residence at the institute inside of Harvard that we worked at called the Wyss Institute, and then helped spin the technology out and have been the CEO ever since.
Tremendous. For those who don't know, what is Rejuvenate Bio?
Yeah, I think with these companies, really key to focus on what your problem you're trying to solve or what challenge you're going after, and then we can talk about how we're doing it. But we want to tackle aging. We view it as one of the largest problems in society. There's multiple ways of seeing this. I think personal level is the way I always start, but we've all had a relative or a pet that basically died too soon. And almost more importantly, saw their quality of life drop dramatically and kind of lose those healthy years or those multiple healthy years of life. And then we don't love seeing that. It's really painful to live through that, both for the patient, but also for the family members. And so we're really interested in creating therapeutics that basically tackle this issue. If you look at it as a systemic issue, it's also like something like a $4 trillion problem from our healthcare system perspective of what we have to spend on folks above 65 to what we spend on folks below 18, for instance. And so we've been able to utilize a wealth of aging science and basically create therapeutics that have a really unique profile. They are very well tolerated, so very robust safety profiles, but they're able to treat multiple different diseases. And so, as someone that is not necessarily a PhD in biology, I always thought it was really intriguing if we could create therapeutics that instead of a laundry list of negative side effects, had a laundry list of different diseases they were able to treat. And so, an example of this is our first treatment that we're bringing forward in both animal health, so as a treatment for heart failure in dogs initially, as well as in humans for a type of cardiomyopathy or heart disease. This same treatment was able to treat or cure 4 different diseases in mice. So heart failure, kidney failure, diabetes, and obesity, all with the same treatment in mice. We were able to do that. And that was really the paper that launched us out of the Church Lab. And so as we move forward, we're really interested in bringing this type of therapeutic to market, both in companion animal health for pets, as well as for humans.
Can you explain just at a really high level, how does gene therapy work?
I actually think gene therapy is simpler than like how small molecules work. So, everybody has experience obviously with taking small molecules. If you take a pill, Advil or Tylenol or anything like that, that's a small molecule. And certainly people have likely taken more than just that. Um, Actually, how those pills work in your body is not necessarily very well understood. Effectively, you have receptors and different proteins, and this chemical entity comes and interacts with it. And, sometimes that is kind of black boxish. Gene therapy is more straightforward in some sense. We take a particular type of virus, and as we all know, viruses are good at delivering genetic material. That's effectively what they do to survive, right? Instead of allowing this virus to do what it typically does, we've ripped out kind of the internal machinery and then dropped in the genetic material we want it to deliver. And so effectively it's a postman for us. And so the letter it's delivering in our case is particular genes, and this is DNA. We operate on the DNA level, but particular genes that have been shown in these what they call transgenic longevity experiments, meaning they had mice that had higher levels of these genes or lower levels, and the animals lived like 30% longer. And so we basically take those genes, drop them into our virus or our postman. The postman gets delivered via one-time intravenous injection, so just through an IV. And then the virus primarily infects liver tissue, so it goes in, drops its genetic material off in the liver cells. And then in our case, those liver cells just basically for the rest of the patient's life, effectively, continually do our high school biology. So take that DNA we dropped off, that gets turned into RNA, and then that RNA gets turned into protein, which is what really, is kind of the operating tool for your body. And so those liver cells just continuously produce those beneficial proteins. In our case, those proteins don't just act inside of our liver cells, they actually are secreted in the bloodstream. And so we have this benefit wide ranging. So for instance, in the dogs we've treated, our gene therapy is primarily infecting liver tissue, but we see robust effects in the heart because of the secreted nature of the protein we're going after. As a summary of gene therapy, the virus is the postman, the carrier, the letter is the DNA you want, and then those are effectively instructions for your body to continuously make a protein. So think about like a postman delivering a blueprint or a drawing for some sort of new engineering device, and then your cells are just constantly creating that same, from those same instructions over and over and over again.
So you're essentially looking for issues related to genetics that if you told the genetics to do something differently with new genetics, you could potentially solve or at least mitigate the issues caused by that. So for instance, cardiomyopathy, if you have a genetic issue with your heart, then you could give it different instructions and say, hey, don't listen to that DNA, listen to this, and then get the heart to work better. Is that a fair statement?
That's a really good categorization of traditional gene therapy. And so all the gene therapies that have been approved in use in humans, I'm talking about adeno-associated virus-based gene therapies, which is the type of virus we use, do exactly what you just said. So people have a particular mutation in a certain gene, and the way we're looking to treat that gene or treat that disease that's caused by that mutation in that gene is to give what they call a functional copy of the gene. And so we kind of patch over the fact that they have a mutated or malfunctioning version of the gene by giving a functional copy. In our case, it's slightly different. Our thesis on aging, and there's a lot of evidence to show this is true, is really that aging is caused by what we call a change in gene expression profiles. And so we've all lived through these. You know, if you've ever interacted with a newborn, like their bodies just do not work the same as our bodies do. And then we've all lived through puberty. But there's also a transition, effectively what genes are turned on and off and at what ratios changes dramatically even after puberty as you age. And this is really what drives a lot of the dysfunction that we kind of colloquially known as aging, but also really drives why we see very similar age-related diseases across populations, across the world. And so what we're doing with gene therapy is not so much changing your underlying genetic code. In fact, our gene therapies don't integrate into the underlying genome. We don't edit. We don't fix any underlying DNA problems. What we fix is really this, what they call epigenetic problem, which is effectively what genes at what levels we need turned on or off. And so effectively it's a more of a question of level, less a question of what's being produced in our case. But traditional gene therapy very much is what you've categorized. So to summarize, for us, it's really about basically overexpressing genes that are beneficial to have on. You will likely be expressing these genes already, but we're just turning it up or turning it down. And that's what we do.
We've looked at a lot of biotech over the years, and I've never seen a group go after both animal and human at the same time. So I'd love to understand kind of the logic and strategy behind that.
Yeah, I'll freely admit that started because we're pet lovers. And actually, as my co-founder Noah started his postdoc, he did one other thing. He adopted a German Shepherd puppy and fell in love like immediately. And so Bear like started about this big and ended up like over 100 pounds. And just cemented in Noah's mind kind of this inherent struggle with pets, which is that there's a very disparate length of lifespans, and particularly healthy lifespans, especially for larger dogs as well. And so it started off as a passion, but as we looked into it, also became something that was really practical. It's very difficult to prove some of these kind of secondary and tertiary endpoints surrounding overall lifespan and these things in humans. Both from a regulatory perspective of trying to dose humans with your therapies, and then also literally just the time it takes to read out those things. Dogs are effectively a species that age something about 10x faster than humans. They also happen to be a species that humans really care about having longer, healthier lifespans. And so it was kind of a natural fit that we could, develop the science in dogs, have it kind of be a precursor to what we're doing in humans, although we've always done things in parallel, but also has turned out to be a business in and of itself. The final thing I'll just mention is I think traditionally this has not been done because of the differences between gene therapies and small molecule development. Like we use the exact dog gene. We know that gene is conserved across dogs and humans. Versus some random chemical entity that you're throwing into both, and it very well may have very different effects in dogs that it does in humans. And an example of this for folks might be like Benadryl. Dogs don't really respond to Benadryl, so like their Benadryl doses are like insane compared to what you would put into human, and things like this. And it's the exact same chemical, right? But it could be very different. Gene therapy, it's far more one-to-one. Like we just go after we use the dog gene in dogs. There's a version of that gene in humans, but we use that human version in humans, and allows us to move forward.
Another thing that's kind of unique about you all compared to other biotechs we've looked at is typically preclinical, clinical trial level biotechs do not have revenues, and you do have millions in revenue. How are you generating revenue? And again, in thinking about your overall strategy, like why lean into generating revenue when, some people just say just focus all in on the clinical trials?
Yeah, look, I think there's multiple ways of doing this. And so obviously there's playbooks where people are spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars before they see a dollar back into the company. Um, we always thought it would be really intriguing to not only get the data that we saw from dogs, but also to have a business that was going to mature much quicker. And that has really played out. So, as you've alluded to, Chris, we've signed over $130 million of development and commercial milestones with animal health companies that will also have, robust royalty payments coming into the company as well.
Hmm.
We've just signed a partnership with Merck Animal Health in
Wow.
conjunction with an equity investment from them. And we now have something like two-thirds of the leading animal health companies have signed partnerships with us and want to move
Hmm.
forward. And so, from our perspective, we love going after kind of audacious goals, but we also love to have wins along the way. And I think there's really multiple opportunities to do that with what we're doing. And so, I think the good news with all of that is you don't have to kind of put your head in the sand and wait 10 years and come back out and see if we've done anything. Like on a year to year basis, we're signing deals, we have partnership dollars coming through, all of these things are happening. And very well, we could have an exit on the animal health business and continue to move forward on human health as well. So that was something that attracted me as a business person, like doing things slightly differently. And I think the science really lent itself to being able to do it in both places. And then we've taken advantage of that with kind of a novel development strategy.
Well, let's dig into that. There's a lot that's really interesting within what you just said. So, first off, on the animal side of it, where do things stand in terms, like, is the approval process just way easier? Are you already approved? Can you already go into market? Are you in market? Help us understand where the animal business is at, and kind of what that approval process looks like in comparison to human trials.
Yeah. So animal health products, or at least the type we're working on, absolutely are regulated. And in our case, we're actually regulated by the FDA. And so it's a different center at the FDA. So we work with the Center for Veterinary Medicine versus CBER on the human side. But they actually talk and they utilize a lot of the same requirements. It is a quicker and easier path to market, but the requirements remain relatively high to get a product out there, which I think is a great thing
Hmm.
there. And so, effectively, with our first program in mitral valve disease, we don't have an approval yet. And so, we're working towards that. The kind of key activities we need to accomplish to be able to do this, and this might surprise people, but the major thing that we need to continue to move forward, get there, is high quality, what they call GMP manufacturing. And so, as you can imagine, um, the FDA is highly concerned not only with the, kind of how your drug product or what your drug does inside of a patient, but also making sure that the drug product you're administering to that patient is high quality and consistent. Almost consistent in some sense, almost more important. It's also kind of the same
Sure.
thing. And so that is actually where a large amount of our resources and time goes, is
Mm.
basically to complying with the GMP requirements, good manufacturing practice requirements, to produce that high quality virus that then allows us to do the other major activity we have left, which is a target animal safety trial, which is effectively a safety trial in dogs. We've done this in some sense, just not with the GMP material. So the FDA wants to see the final drug product with the final manufacturing process tested to make sure it's safe. After the completion of that, there's some other activities, but those are the two major ones. We will receive what they call a conditional approval, which allows us to begin marketing the therapy and move it forward. To put this in perspective on the human side, um, we would have to do similar GMP requirements to get a full approval, although you'd have far more time to do it. And that's because there's typically like three different clinical trial steps that you go through. The first one is safety focused. The second one is traditionally dose focused in an efficacy context. And the third one is what they call your pivotal efficacy trial, which is really efficacy focused going forward there. Now, obviously, there's variations on that. Often gene therapy doesn't actually do three trials, it does more like two-ish, but that's traditionally what you're looking at from that process. So in animal health, yes, we can get there quicker. We're still held to a very high standard, The good news with all of that is everything we're doing on the animal health side will port across as we move our human therapies into clinical trials and eventually to approval as well.
It's interesting because I feel like even just in watching television for really the first time in my life that I can remember, I'm starting to see commercials for animal health, basically pharmaceuticals. And that's not something we've necessarily seen before. It feels as though there is a real growing demand in the wellness category for dogs and pets in general, and being willing to spend to take care of your animals. And thus drugs are coming behind that to take care of their health. Is that generally what you see in like the overall category of animal health just in general is also growing at a fairly large rate?
I'm not like an animal health veteran, so I had to learn this process just like other people may be doing and like getting interested in this. It's crazy how much money is made in animal health. I mean, you're talking in some of the leading companies have market caps in like the 60 to 90 billion dollar range. And if you look at revenue growth, look at it through COVID, it's crazy. Like it just went, we went through a recession or whatever, a big downturn. Animal health went like this through it, both from a revenue perspective, market cap perspective of these companies and things like this. And I'm talking about the big animal health pharmaceutical players. But you could also see this in like dog food, is another category where people are spending more and more money. I think alluding to commercials about this, you see like, people are effectively making like gourmet meals or feeding gourmet meals to their dogs and things like this all over. And I think the biggest takeaway is like my lived experience is very much what a lot of people are living, which is your dog is a member of your family. And if given the option, people are very interested in trying to increase those amounts of high quality life with their dogs or their cats as well. And so, absolutely, I mean, it's borne out in the numbers, but I think it's really driven by this mindset that has been there, but I think is shifting for more and more people that your animal is really a part of your family. And so, like, what would you do to, basically be able to be with a family member longer? It's like, a lot of people, it's like almost everything.
Something else you said was that, if the animal health business kind of takes off, there's an opportunity to sell that business and continue on with the human business. As an investor coming in this round, how would I benefit from the animal business being sold off, and would I continue to benefit from the human focus side of the business as well?
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine a couple of different things. I think the most straightforward is look, the animal health business will start generating like robust royalties and revenues. And so your dilution is going to be, minimized going forward because we can just basically operate the business off all of that. I think you could also imagine another scenario where there's literally an exit on the animal health side. I think one scenario you can imagine is we actually sell Rejuvenate Bio to a major animal health player. Can kind of concurrently with doing that, we create a spinout company that holds the human assets. We seed that human company with some of the proceeds from the sale. Investors basically get their money back with the multiple, obviously, and then have another lottery ticket on the human business that's moving forward. And so, we call it kind of financial flexibility, but it's really about leverage. And like if we have multiple ways of getting capital, then we're not beholden to a particular, asset class or a particular acquire or anything like that. And I think that's another kind of hidden benefit of operating the company the way we've done is like we're going to be in a position where we don't have to take the first offer that comes across the table. And so we're super excited about that. So from an investor standpoint, I think you're going to get multiple bites at the apple, which is, I think, a really attractive thing. And I think even an animal health bite represents something like a 5 to 7x return, just on the animal health side.
Merck just invested, but if you think kind of longer term about what you need to do to get your human drugs to market, how long is it until you get kind of that first human drug to market, and what do you think from a capital expenditure perspective it will take?
Yeah, the interesting part about the human market is, and I think this is a benefit of it that people would point out, is there's such a robust ecosystem on both IPOing and acquisition, pre-commercialization or pre-approval, that when you will have your drug on the market for human health is not really the question. Where it is absolutely the question in animal health. That is traditionally when acquisitions and things like that happen. Is like either right before approval or right then. And so I think the key with the human business is not necessarily when we have it on the market, but when we can show first in human clinical data. The good news is with gene therapy, these placebo effect things are not as prevalent. And that's both the gene therapy piece, but also the particular endpoints that we tend to read out are like far less fakeable. They're not surveys, they're not like pain scores, things like this. For instance, with the first human indication we're going after, they'll be looking at the amount of arrhythmias people are having. So these folks will literally have instrumentation that's reading how many arrhythmias they have. It's not something that's,
Yeah, they're at more or less.
Right, it's very quantitative. It's
Yeah.
actually changes dramatically quickly too. At least what we've seen in mice, like within a month, you can see like a difference. Humans, I think it'll take a little bit longer, but something on that. So my point being is like, I think the key thing there is like how quickly we could generate first in human clinical data. And you're talking about something like 2-ish years, we could have first in human clinical data. From there, you have a robust ecosystem where you can go public on the back of that clinical data. You can partner those programs. You can also be acquired on the back of that clinical data. Now, look, moving it further down the line tends to make the companies more valuable, but really that value inflection point and what we're targeting on the human side is really getting to first in human clinical data. That's when things really, really get exciting.
I want to give you the last word. For investors who are on the line, they think it's interesting, they're not there yet. What do you want them to know?
Hey, look, like we've done this kind of 2 different reasons. First off, we're ultra passionate about this. We think it's doing a lot of good, and we think it will make people money. And so we're interested in people getting on board and being a part of it. And so we want to be really straightforward with what the opportunity is, and everything like that. And I think there's fit issues with folks, and they need to make sure it's a good fit for them. But the second part that I think is important for us is we also really wanted to build a community of folks. And so I think that's something traditionally biotech has not done a great job at. Even though a lot of the science and the challenges they're going after are really inspirational and truly game-changing, it's not like tech products where we have all these early evangelists that are utilizing the technology and are getting the word out and helping build this and kind of, almost there's movements around some of these companies. Like that's something that I think we need to change. We need to get people excited from day one about this. There's certainly like folks have done things with patient advocacy groups in the past and things like this, and those things are helpful, but we also need to get the word out about these types of companies to folks and build communities and movements. And so we are super excited about people doing that with us, whether that means continuing to follow us, getting on our mailing list, putting in an investment. All of these things help do that. And from our perspective, I think us being successful doing this hopefully will drive more biotechs to do this, and we already are seeing that. And so I'm a big believer in this. We've raised multiple rounds of more traditional venture capital. I have been more energized by this process and the feedback we've gotten and the folks that are coming on board than I have ever been for what at times have been larger funding rounds from venture capitalists. This is like a really special process for us, and we're hopeful we can share it with people, but obviously realize it needs to be a fit for everybody and they need to make their own decisions.
If you like what you heard on the show today, you can invest $250 or more in Rejuvenate Bio on WeFunder until August 28th, 2026. And of course, if you want to learn more about why this company scored a 4.9 out of 5 on the Kingscrowd proprietary rating scale, you can go to kingscrowd.com and search Rejuvenate Bio. Be sure to give us a like and a comment wherever you listen so we make sure more great investors like you can find us. Happy investing.